And our class for today talks about social and environmental responsibilities. And that's why I brought up the social part of organizations and being a part of the social fiber. And would there be corporate social responsibility? And if there is a corporate social responsibility, is it fair for employers to expect employees to be a part of that social fiber? That actually, because the employer cannot maintain their social corporate responsibility if they don't have employees engaged and involved and wanting to participate. And so that lends us to our discussion today. In the social and environmental responsibilities section of this, for this week's topic, it's telling us from our workbook that by the end of this chapter, you should be able to explain the nature of social and environmental issues facing modern business organizations. You should be able to describe the adverse effects of economic activity and how it's impacted by the employees and organizations. Also, too, we should be able to look at the trends and the changes in the way individuals live and work. And particularly since this pandemic, what has been a traditional, oh, that can be done, within 2 years, we have probably done so much in 2 years that we hadn't done in 10 years prior. Because one of the issues that I saw was that there was the clearinghouse, the automatic clearinghouse in the banks. And you had a difficulty transferring funds electronically between banks. COVID hit, people were limiting face-to-face interactions, and suddenly the banks are opening up, the banks opened up. We also had where some organizations are going cashless. We also have where individual limits were increased to accommodate more withdrawals at the ATM machines and whatever. You actually had machines being adjusted to receive deposits and so on. And so the question begs, how much of that would have transpired had we not been forced into it by the pandemic? What are your thoughts?
Despite all of the digitalization that they have brought forward for the customers, the line is still long. Now, during COVID, during the onset, especially like March and beyond in 2020 to 2021, in the beginning, I work at Carmichael Road branch. The line used to literally be at Meat Max. So I used to have to walk the line straight around the corner. I used to be almost to Meat Max parking lot, serving customers. Some customers just can't do it. Like, they're not computer savvy, despite we have customers we try every week. I mean, it's not that you're annoyed, but they come to you and they say, I just can't do it. I need your help. I can't get it. And then you have to make sure that you show them that you understand what is going on, and you can't force anything on them. Now, to limit the people in the bank, yes, you have to go to the ATM to make your deposit. You have to clear your check, make your deposit to the ATM, and then bring the card back, release, go back to the ATM to make your withdrawal. It is a lot on the customer and it is a lot on the staff. But that's what the people tell us to do, and we have to follow suit. But you still have to be empathetic for those that are having a hard time, because that's your customer.
So what would you say are those services must, or you would say must, you have to come in for. I remember there was one time when your renewal card was actually mailed to you.
Right. So you have to come in. Now they upgraded the Visa debit card to the MasterCard. And so you have to come in to collect your MasterCard. Now what they're doing is they're actually printing them, and we have to call customers to collect. If you do not have an account and you have a mortgage or a credit card, you have to come in branch to pay that, because you don't have a debit card to go to the ATM to pay the credit card. If you have a delinquent credit card, if you have a delinquent mortgage, you have to visit branch in order to pay it. But you have to be current in order to do it.
Let me ask this question. Don't every account holder have a debit card?
Every account holder should. They should. But like, okay, if your daughter is off to school and you choose to give your daughter your ATM card to use in the States, you don't have a card.
Oh,
and then
okay.
You don't want, if we try to say, well, you need your card because you need your card to do the transactions, because doing audit, they actually will look at what transactions we process in branch and why we process them. You have to put an explanation. So I have to say, Ms. Fraser left her ATM card home.
Okay.
You don't have to do an explanation for every time.
Okay.
Ms. Fraser, just another point. If I can piggyback on what Tira was saying, everybody wants us to go digital, but I don't think we need to ask the question, do we have the infrastructure or the proper infrastructure in place to actually be able to facilitate that? Because I know after Dorian, they've been trying to get the sand all off the ground from that time. I think that what they're running into issues with, and this being central bank, with actually getting the AFIs, the authorized the clearing banks, to actually buy into the sand dollar, to use it. And I was telling someone, I said, this don't make no sense. You are asking me as a financial institution to bring in a competitive product that will compete with my credit card and my debit card services, which I'm making money on, in order for something to be done free. So I don't think that they've actually weighed the pros and cons effectively. I know we need a digital currency, okay? And I know that we were really forward thinking in that aspect, unlike the rest of the world. But you asking me to come in and use a machine, and when my mortgage money gets stuck in the machine, you won't tell me come back. You know that ain't gonna work, right?
Right.
So I think it's the infrastructure. If you want us to go digital, then you got to have the infrastructure in place to facilitate and ease. And I got a problem with this digital thing, not the digital, but cashless, because it affects our senior citizens in a tremendous way.
Right.
And when we start fooling with the sage, we start fooling with some people's emotions. I ain't call out bank name, but the other bank from Canada. I leave it like that.
The other thing that is an issue for our country in terms of a social fabric and financial services is the banks that the islands that don't have a bank present in their islands. So what happens in those locales? And quite honestly, our nation, the Bahamas, is an archipelago of islands, and in other countries, governments have to produce infrastructure just once. We need to produce the infrastructure 7, 8, 9 times, because we are an archipelago of islands as opposed to one particular setup. And so what happens to Long Island? What happens to Auckland's Mayagona and Inagua when trade is actually happening and going on? Are we saying to them they need to go to a barter system, or they need to go to a cash-intensive situation? And so all of those things affect the social fiber of our country in a holistic way?
Ms. Frazier, I think because I remember we did a project in one of my classes relative to the banking sector and how the closures on the outer islands actually affected the constituents on those particular islands, and how persons were using the web shops to actually be transferring money back and forth, which they were never designed to do. Because the whole premise of the FATF and saying, oh, we need to deal with all of this, everything is too cash intensive. We don't want to go back to a bartering system. My suggestion, and it's just my humble little suggestion, ain't nothing too crazy. Start with a central bank, start with a different licensee. Give them the ability to go into the outer islands and set up sand dollar. Because if you're going to have all of these issues with declaring banks and all the other stuff, use another entity that is a licensee and just promote the product that way. You started in Exuma. You had to have had some success in Exuma to have actually put it this far. But if you're going to have these issues, find another way, because you're struggling to implement something and it's affecting us tremendously, because as the branches close, that's going to create a major problem.
Okay, and then also too, the question becomes, can we give additional incentives to the existing institutions that they will see the wisdom of joining up with? Because it where they might be increasing expenses on one hand, they have some other incentives, either government policies, government initiatives, or whatever have you, to play along with the central bank. Those are the issues that are on the table, and I can only suspect that our policymakers are having this conversation to come up with something that would affect the social fiber of the Bahamas. We have to move away from thinking New Providence is the Bahamas. And look at a wider scope of how we can use local government, how we can use the commissioner's office and those kinds of people and whatever else we have in place. I'm not sure of all the places that we have, but how do we get trade supported in those outer islands and the out layers? And I'm looking and having it in place for Bimini in the north and Inagua in the south and beyond. And how do we trade with our neighbors, Turks and Caicos, Jamaica, what's the next one? Trinidad and those in the Eastern Caribbean and all the rest of it. Those are the social issues that need to happen, and the social responsibilities that are on the table. And it's not necessarily a political conversation, but a social conversation, and to understand how it impacts our environment. And then we are also going to look at what it means to be sustainable and sustainability, and how we assess those issues relevant to accounting for sustainability and across the entire sector. And also the purposes and features of internal management systems. How do we go about accounting for what comes in, where it goes, and the transparency issues as it relates to those kinds of things. Transparency is a word that's thrown about recently as it speaks to environmental responsibilities. You hear a lot about climate change and the effect of renewable energy, as it were, or using things that would not necessarily endanger your wildlife and your environment. So those are those kinds of things that come under the environmental responsibility and the impact that your organization would have on the environment in which you live and the communities in which you serve. That's all wrapped up in what is the social and environmental responsibilities of an organization individuals to individuals in an organization and how it impacts everything that we have going on. So on the top of page 76, it actually says social issues concerns the way in which people live and work. And gone are the days where people say, I am one person at home or after 5, and I'm a different person between 9 to 5. We are finding that issues that people are faced with are finding their ways inside organizations and inside, and it can actually affect their behavior on the jobs. And so we have a lot of, and we've seen increases in employee assisted programs where it could cater to mental illness, for example. It can cater to alcoholism, drug use, and whatever else. Does the employer have a responsibility to the employees to provide these kinds of assistance? What are your thoughts?
Can you repeat that again for me, please, ma'am? I got distracted.
Okay. Say you have, give an example, you have a very good worker, but for whatever reason, that worker is faced with alcoholism. And you've noticed a change in their behavior on the job and their commitment to the job, and you've seen their work kind of gotten less productive. Is that the employer's responsibility to provide these employee assisted programs to kind of rehabilitate that employee? Or are we to the place where we're saying, fire that one and next, let's get somebody else?
I think that it is incumbent upon the immediate supervisor to, because you have a road into, you're not butting into this particular person's business. I see the decline in your work. Therefore, there is a concern on my end from the business aspect. Mm-hmm. Based upon the social aspect in regards to, do you all share any type of friendship or anything, relationship outside the confines of the workplace? I think this is where it goes back to colleague care. Your friend got a problem. It's incumbent upon you, if that's your friend, to try to help him solve the problem. We always look at our employees as if they're just that, but they're not just employees, they're customers as well. They're internal customers.
Internal customers.
And the thing is that what we need to understand, if this person is willing to seek the help, I think as an organization, an example is, I know you use that scenario, but what if you know of a woman who, Ms. Frazier, somebody that works underneath you, who's going through a divorce and who's having all kind of issue where children are involved? Mm-hmm. You just can't cut that off. You have to be able to mitigate the situation, especially if this is a good worker. You have to be able to do that, because for you to say, well, we're not doing anything, get your act together, all of us have our own problems, that is not colleague care in the way that it needs to operate. I think that you have to interject yourself in there. And if help is accepted, then you move on from that point and get them the help that they need.
Okay. I'm a proponent of, you have to at least make a step, and there are minimum standards that are acceptable. And I've seen a lot of the big organizations have gone to where their whole employee benefits area. So human resources is no longer just clocking your NIB, making sure your money gets to the bank, and that's it. They have gone to a complete personal growth and development and wellness of the employee. Because one of the things that we have seen is that a better employee makes the organization more productive. And the more you can support and show interest in the wellness, complete wellness, mental health, any substance abuse, anything in that regard, the better. And so all of that comes under the social issues, and because it is involved with how people live and work, and also how do you reduce the stress on some of these jobs. And then we have Charles Handy, who came up with the Shamrock organization. Shamrock organization, meaning that there are three components to your workforce: full-time workers, part-time workers, and third-party providers. We are seeing the advent of automation. Before you had to pick up all your paper and all your invoices and go into a bank to see a loan officer. And now you have people who are saying loans by phone. You actually have what they call mortgage specialists who are moving about and meeting people at coffee shops, meeting people at their homes, meeting people at their jobs, and actually helping them and assisting them to get ready for placement of a mortgage at a financial institution. And you're seeing things like online payments. Can you think of anything else, any other ideas that you've seen was a shift from 10, 15 years ago?
With the institution that I'm employed at, if you have what we call, if you have a request or an offer for a credit card or a loan, and you go to the ATM and do a transaction, you can actually action it from the ATM and get the loan or the credit card.
Okay.
So you can do it. You could do it mobile on your phone. You can get an email also, and you can actually respond to it, and the application would generate for you to sign, and your credit card or your monies just go on your account. So everything has changed. As you say, gone are the days that you have to actually come inside and sit in front of an officer and bring all the documents. Once you're employed and they see a salary go into your account, you get it without anything else, just your current identifications. That's it.
Okay, but we're going to talk more about that a little further down into the evening, because there are pros and cons to everything. Handy talked about the full-time worker, the part-time worker, and third-party providers. They also talk about consultants working or outsourcing, and employers who want consultants and the reason why they might need consultants. Handy's view is that the reliance on full-time workforce has diminished over the last several years. And there were several reasons for that. Some of the reasons that he highlighted was that staff have to be paid, whether they're busy or not. So if you show up from 9 to 5, you probably would have, and some people would have only put in 4 hours in that 8-hour time frame between getting coffee, standing around by somebody else's desk, surfing the internet, doing something else that is not necessarily work-related. They could actually easily lose 2 hours, and then they go out for lunch. And particularly in the days when we were picking up children from school, everyone went out at 3. Sometimes we don't get back till 4:30 if you have to drop them to a certain area. And so full-time employees are traditionally more expensive than the part-time or the outsourced ones. And that's why some companies have been making a decision about that. Certain legal duties that you have to full-time employees, which pose additional costs in terms of having a physical workspace and what that workspace would look like. The nature of the job is changing all the time, and there's no guarantee that full-time workers are suited for the present role. So you have to do training and ongoing training. And we find that persons who work outside of organization or outsourcing, they spend for their own training and development because they want to get the jobs. as opposed to once you come into the organization, then we have to have a training and development and growth program in place, which may or may not be a part of the wellness. So traditionally, full-time employees are more expensive than part-time and or outsourced employees. And then when you have internal employees, like Kendrick would have said, customer care or client, or what was that? Client care? Employee care.
Colleague.
Colleague care. Okay. Colleague care. Colleague care costs something. Okay. If you'd be more inclined to manage a colleague internally better than an outsourced third-party service provider, for example. And so those are some of the pros and cons of it. And if you pay for results, you're not necessarily paying for time, you're paying for results. You find that they are more productive when they are expecting to have certain things done. And you don't have to go through all the legal ramification if you have to terminate them or you want to terminate them, because full-time employees have more legal rights than outsourced situation. And so the second component was the part-time worker. This could be a good thing if the part-time worker gets paid based on the results. And part-time workers are more flexible in their hours. And so if an organization was thinking about extending work hours, and I've known an organization that is open 7 days a week. And what they do is they have people working on an hourly rate, and they have a shift rotation, and they are not full-time employees, they're independent contractors. And so you show up for your shift, and once you work those hours, you get paid for those hours. So they actually go from 7 to 1, 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. And there are people working straight through. And it's working for them. And it works because the productivity level or the compensation level is based on the hours and the time that those individuals actually work. So it's easier for them to adjust any profile, any changes in that organization if these people are part-time. One person comes out, the next one comes in, or somebody wants to work extra hours, you would just slide them in. So flexibility is something that the part-time contractor workers are seeing more so than the full-time employees. And then finally, or they have a third-party provider of services, which is an outside independent contractor. They are competing for your business with other contractors. And so you find that there's a significant proportion of work is now being carried out under projects, what they call project management. And so the services required are for a definite period of time. We have this to be done. We hire somebody just to do that and pay the third party for what it delivers. And so in that environment, you get what you pay for. I expect this to be done, and so on and so forth. I remember one time back in the financial service, particularly, we had wads and wads of paper, and you had to put on file a lot of stuff. You're now seeing organizations moving to electronic filing and DocuWare kind of scanning and keeping electronic files. And we used to have to do an exercise of shredding paper every year, usually around the summertime when we had summer students in whose job function it was to just stand to a company shredder and just shred paper all day long for a fee. But now you have companies offering shredding facilities after a certain length of time. And the accounting firm, the legal firms, and the banking firms, financial services firms, they use those companies who would come in for a couple hours a day with an industrial type shredder, you just stand there and they shred everything for you. That is completely being outsourced. And so we are able to use those resources for your part-time summer students more productively than just standing there shredding paper all year round. We've actually seen also two companies working, outsourcing call centers where their job is to make contact with their customers for free. And when you dial that number, you get somebody answering from a call center perspective, usually in a lower labor cost environment, which is right back to companies looking at ways to actually save on the expenses or curtail expenses. And so Charles Candy saying there were those three basic groups of individuals. What he's also saying is that now there's also a fourth part of the shamrock. So the traditional shamrock, what he start off with are just three leaves to the clover, which was full-time, part-time, and outsourced third-party providers. But what we're now seeing also too is a hybrid of this, where the organization gets the customer to do the work that the services is provided, and the expenditure a bit less expenditures and efforts. What that might mean is like where the airlines actually get the customers to check themselves in, or some stores in the United States, you have the self-checkout, where you just put your stuff there, the money slides in. You're not having to hire somebody as a cashier in those kind of environments. Or you actually have where gas stations where the driver pays for the gas and pumps it himself. And you see that, and it's amazing how many drivers from the Bahamas go away and fall right in line with pulling up to the gas station, jumping out, filling up their car, going inside and paying for, or using their credit card at the pumps. But when they come back home, they pull up and they sit and they wait for somebody to come out and pump their gas.
Order I-6.
Exactly. And wait on long lines to do so. Okay. Especially if the pumps are far away from the actual place where cash is actually being accepted. So organizations are looking at, do I really need 5 pump attendants? Or can I get away with some self-service pumps and give you an incentive for the self-service pump where the gas is 3 cents cheaper or as opposed to XYZ? I also know a service station who would say, if you show up for your gas at midnight or about 11 o'clock at night, you get a reduced price than if you're in the day and they're so busy and everybody's lining up and whatever have you. So those are ways that organizations are looking at how they can benefit by affecting their expenses. And as they think about how do we serve our customers cheaper, there's lots of things that will lead to changes in the framework of how our organization is set up. And so what we're going to talk about now is what determines the span of control and the chain of management from top to bottom, and the role that communication play. How important do you think is a clear line of communication from top to bottom?
I think the one thing that we lack in the workplace, and this is just my observation, we don't have clear defined lines of chains of command. I think that once we understand that there is a chain of command, then I think there will be proper communication in the workplace. I just think there's a lack of a chain of command.
So if there is a lack of the chain of command, I'm not sure I agree with that, because every organization have, or every organization have your line staff, your supervisors, your managers, your executives, and your board of directors. A lot of them do have that. But what I'm seeing or feeling is that there might be not clear communication between those lines. Because you know who your immediate boss is, and you know who your boss is, for the most part.
Good night. It's lack of communication, because anything going on to the organization that I know about, the customers will tell, and then you say, oh, okay, I didn't know. You know why? We don't know. Customers know more what's going on than us.
Than the employees.
Communication.
That's true.
That's it.
That is true.
Tell you what is going on, and that time you there looking stupid, like you get egg on your face, and you say no. Say
that can't go.
That ain't go.
And then you find out that the customer was right.
Yeah.
Quite correct. Quite correct. And also too, I was supposed to tell you when you said if the company was responsible, if you have a staff that has a drinking problem or whatever, I said must see in the real world, because if any staff see you when maybe a cup in your hand, they'll take a picture of you first before they say something to you, and when you could reach to work the next day, you wouldn't even have a job, irregardless of how long you've been working there. So
you feel that there are some organizations where colleague care is non-existent.
Non-existent, none whatsoever.
Okay. Well, I will also say, we're not pinpointing any particular organization.
No, we ain't calling no name.
There are some organizations that fit in that category. What also happened is that we have to recognize that depending on the type of business, the structure might be a little flatter than it would be ordinarily. In financial services, the structure is usually very defined and hierarchical, where you have 4 levels of control, and that's because that type of business has to have a lot of audit trails and a lot of checks and balances and controls in place that one person can't sign off on a lot of stuff. It usually has to be passed to another department or passed to an internal auditor or passed to somebody else because of what we call good corporate governance, where you don't want to have any issues related to different things happening in the organization itself. It also lends itself well to the type of business, lends itself to the knowledge and the skills and the educational level of the managers and staff that are involved. If we're running a petty shop where the person who's at the cashier is also the person stocking, is also the person cleaning up and mopping the floor, then very little span of control is in place, or very little structures in place because everybody's doing everything. But when you have a bigger retail scenario where we're talking like the size of a Kelly's or AID, then you might have a specific level of workers on the floor as a different and separate apart from the supervisors, separate apart from the managers and senior managers, and separate and apart from the executives. They all are supposed to be working together for the objectives and the missions of the organization. And so you want to make sure that communication happens at all levels, and the vision and the mission of the organization is communicated through the entire organization. In my experience, the more productive organizations are those organizations where the corporate culture actually is aligned with the strategies and the structure that is in place. and communication flows very smoothly between all of the different departments and the employees. And people understand how whatever they're doing in their small little area impacts the total productivity of the organization. And that is a management mandate to make sure that the corporate culture is aligned with the strategy and structure that they put in place. For example, if I recognize my organization has more women employees, 75% of them are women around the childbearing age, and I want to make sure that my employees are engaged and taken care of and actually can produce. One of the things that I might say to the founders and the executives of the organization is to say, we should have a child care center so they don't have to worry about who will be taking care of their children until they knock off or until they get off from work or whatever have you. And you would find that if they know their children are taken care of, these particular women might work doubly hard or more productively than if they have to be constantly waiting on a phone call, not sure where the aftercare program is in place and whether or not, and the aftercare program might be where there are people involved who could help with homework and do other things between the hours of 3 to 5 when the kids get off from school and whatever have you. And in the States, for example, we've seen more and more organizations looking at things like that. How do we help our employees to be more productive? Shanquelle, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, ma'am, because piggybacking off of that point, I know an organization who actually would have used those tactics in a manipulative manner to say, we're providing you with gym, we're providing you with showers, with a cafe for free food, so that you don't need to go home. Everything is here. So why do you need to go home?
We love you.
So they have bedrooms. They have bedrooms and beds.
They had little cots, not to say full-on beds, but they had stations where if you need to catch a nap.
Why do you see that as a manipulative process?
It's the military.
So you wouldn't go home.
Because they saying that you just on call.
You don't have to take advantage of it, do you?
But it's like, if you're saying I'm going home to take a shower, the manager will be like, well, these accommodations are here for you. Why do you need to go home? That's when it becomes manipulative, because once I've worked my obligatory 9 to 5 and some, I feel like I could go home and take a shower. That's
a workplace or cult.
It could be the same, one and the same.
But again, keep in mind what I said originally. Each organization would have what they call a corporate culture. And in that corporate culture would be those basic core values of that organization that they want to espouse to their employees. If the employees see it as negative, then it will not be productive, because the employees will not fall in line and be engaged in that environment. They will just clock in their 9 to 5 and leave. There are some people who, if the organization has properly communicated their vision and their mission statement, and you know that this organization have a very strong work ethics in terms of we might need people working extra hours. And as a result of them working extra hours, there's compensation for them working extra hours. And if they want to work extra hours and get compensated for working those extra hours, we now have these facilities where they can take a shower, they can take a rest, they can take XYZ. And they are usually the organizations would have where the employees could have ownership expectation, either through stocks or shares or profit sharing or whatever have you. If those incentives are in place, then it's not a manipulation in the regard. It is incentive for the organization, for the employees to be more productive. So it depends on, in my mind, what is the compensation for the work, the extra hours, and whatever have you. And there are some organizations who would say, we only hire young single people because they're the ones who don't have to rush home to children and husbands and whatever else. If that is their corporate culture, then their strategy is to hire those people who could stay there and work all night, or put them in a think tank environment, and they could just give you a 50-hour week, a 50-hour or 60 or even 100-hour week, depending on what the compensation is. And Kendrick, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. What you said just now, they would only hire single persons. Isn't that then an infraction in regards to the law, then discrimination?
How will you prove that?
Okay. How can I prove that?
Yeah, because there's plenty laws on the books. But the disciplinarian and the policing and whatever have you, they don't come right out and say, that's not why we're hiring you. Let me step back, because I don't want to identify any particular group at this particular time. But one time ago, I'm talking about 20 years ago, in order for you to work at RBC, CIBC, you had to be a certain height. You had to have a pleasant face. I'm talking 20 years ago. You had to look a certain way. Same thing with restaurants. If I'm hiring waitresses, I'm hiring people who look a certain way as waitresses. When we used to have the, I'm going back a couple of years back, the Playboy Lounge. You actually hired people who could look like a Playboy bunny. And so they don't tell you, as a matter of fact, I remember in one cruise line, and that would have been 7 years ago, they did not hire the person because they said they had uniforms, small, medium, and large.
Oh boy.
So that's one-off situation, or could that be an XYZ? Companies look at the cost of maintaining these employees. And wellness and being a part of a wellness program caters to certain organizations.
Wow.
Yes, it might sound unfair if you're on that side of the spectrum, but how do you prove it? If a company said, I got 10 employees, 10 resumes, and they're going through those resumes, they're looking for things that are not necessarily how many BGCs, how many masters or bachelors or whatever have you. They are looking for other things that are nonverbals that will come out in the organization and whatever have you. If we have the majority of our employees are female in the childbearing ages, I could expect that X amount of them will be off 3 months of the year that I have to pay for. Well, then I'll hire more men. Yep. Even if the wives end up having children, they would not take 3 months off.
Only 2 weeks.
Exactly. So when the resumes come in, I could have 15 female and 2 men, and I'm looking to see if any of these men could really make it happen or whatever. I might not come out and verbally say that, but Tom gets the nod because of our culture being we want to change it from having so many females, or we don't want to invest in having so many females, or whatever have you.
I'm just thinking right now when you said, how do I prove that? I know there's certain aspects of US law I could look at, but I can't really think of anything in Bahamian law really and truly that would, the most you would have to have is a whistleblower from the inside.
Yeah.
And then surveys and examinations can be done through a civil suit, through the presentation of your case. But unless you have a whistleblower on the inside, that ain't gonna happen.
That ain't gonna happen. And not only that, if you have to feel very strongly about the situation if you want to engage a lawyer who asks you for a minimum of $2,000 to take your case.
Yeah, basically a retainer.
Exactly. So those kind of issues what comes to the fore. In addition to one of the things that you hear me talk about is corporate culture, and there are some cultural factors that affect what happens in an organization. And when we talk about culture, we're talking about those patterns of values, behaviors, and attitudes that prevail in an organization. And they can affect the decision and the way the group actually behaves. We talk about the organization where there's a social committee and they're planning social events, and there's an expectation for you to attend a certain amount of those social events. And if you're not attending those social events, then you are ostracized, and in some cases even not seen as a team player. And so you have to understand the culture that exists in the organization in which you work. I remember back, and I'm talking 20 years ago, where a particular organization had, and I remember being told as a female, I was not earmarked for a position that I wanted. And when I asked who were, I got a list of all the men. And so if an organization isn't earmarking you, isn't promoting you, isn't helping you to grow in that environment, I don't think they'll be boldly saying that today because of the discrimination and the diversity and all those gender equality stuff that's in the marketplace today. But that would have happened 20 years ago. And what do you say? That was the culture of the organization and the values and the beliefs of the system at that particular time. The military used to be something like that at one point too, where they say we want a few good men. And that was their slogan. And so it didn't encourage women to participate. We're seeing now more female doctors. A few years back, that was not the case. And in particular areas was not the case. You might have a lot of female in your GP environment, the general practitioner, but not in your surgical or your anesthesia or your neurosurgery type areas or your heart type areas. And so it's an unspoken cultural factor as opposed to a defined situation that is actually being discussed. And so the whole concept behind the values of an organization, and they're always formal and informal cultural factors, and they are influenced by senior management over time. And they can change to reflect when a new manager comes in, or a new CEO, or a new board member. Those things are affected by what is the values and belief system of that individual who's actually sitting in a chair taking the lead. And so you need to understand that there are some factors that would help. I cannot say enough that communication is what bridges the gap between employers and employees in terms of being engaged and able to deliver on what the employees are actually, the productivity of the organization. We are constantly being told that the employees are not as productive as 10, 15 years ago, which is a concern because they now have better tools than what was 15, 20 years ago. And so we as leaders have to look at what's preventing our employees from being productive. Back in my day, joining an organization, you felt like you had to stay there for 15, 20, 30 years, unless something was wrong with you. And nowadays, you have a lot of the millennials saying, I see this as a stepping stone to get someplace else. And so in their mind, 5 years is long, as opposed to 15, 20 years back in the day. And so communication lines have to flow, chain of command needs to flow, people have to communicate effectively and directly, and managers have to distinguish between relevant information and those things that are just tasks that needs to be done. There's always important, urgent stuff to get done, but there's also important but not urgent stuff that needs to happen. And somebody needs to actually call out what are the priorities and then look at flexible working arrangements. And on page 82, it talks about working from home. So what has been your experience on the advantages of working from home?
This one ain't for me.
You haven't worked from home yet?
Me neither. I haven't worked from home.
Okay.
Never.
Work from home.
Never.
So none of you have worked from home at all?
Yeah, I'm still currently working from home. So the major advantages, well, for me, because I don't have any kids and no distractions, is I have less distractions here than I would in the office, with my boss always calling me or coming in my office or coworkers stopping by. It's kind of flexible in terms of, because I know I don't have to wake up to fight traffic, I kind of have a more flexible morning, and that makes me more relaxed, because once I wake up, I know I literally just have to walk to the next room. So I could take my time and center myself and get ready for the day. What I do notice is that I'm working way more home than I would in office. That's not really I don't think, a plus, because literally, especially when we were on like full on lockdown, it was like I had no separation. So I had a hard time trying to figure out what is home and what is work, because everything was getting merged. But I guess now that everything is opening back up, now that you have more places to go or maybe could take a breather, that's been a better. But I would say the major thing is just the flexibility of kind of setting your day and less disruptions.
One of the things that you mentioned was that you were more relaxed because you did not have to commute to work. You didn't have to fight the traffic. So in a more relaxed environment, then you could work longer.
And then even like, because the building where I work has restrictions. So whereas I have to get kicked out of the building at 7 because the security is going home, now I really don't have a cutoff. So if I have a flowing thought process, I don't have to get up and abruptly stop that. I could just continue to work, which I say could be a plus or a minus.
Okay. If you have your books and you can mark it at page 84, it actually talks about the importance or the advantages of home working, and they have it broken down between the employer and the employee. The advantages to the employer is the cost savings on office accommodation and all the stuff like the coffee, the paper, the files, and all that wonderful great stuff that people use, and the larger potential of what it is costing the pooling of employees. And the flexibility, especially if the workers are self-employed, they end up working longer hours in some cases. And if they have to leave because of safety or because of getting kicked out of the building. So those are some of the advantages to the employer. And to the employee, it actually talk about not having to commute through traffic to work. And work can be organized around other commitments that you might have. And especially if you are homeschooling, because during the pandemic, kids were not going to school either. So you can organize around it, other commitments, and you have the freedom to decide on what your work pattern would be. Some people are better workers late at night. And so if I could just go online to listen to or see all my emails, but then my work actually start at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I could go into 8 or 9. It works better for me because I can sleep later or whatever have you. So it has the freedom to decide what your work pattern would be. In terms of the disadvantages, it spoke about the disadvantage to the employer. There's a problem of control. We don't know what the employee is doing. We also have problems of confidentiality in some cases, or problems of coordination. There's less face-to-face contact training, and not all training can be done remotely. And then there's an element of trust is essential for managers to have confidence in the process that is being maintained. And of course, the security. Those are disadvantages to working from home. Is my husband or my kids looking at the information? Do I have filing cabinets that I could lock away the company information in or whatever have you? A lot of companies have what they call login credentials and keys that they could do from home and whatever have you. And also does the employee have the proper workstation, the proper setup that is conducive to working? Because you might not have living in an environment where there was a separate room you could go to and actually have your work spread or set up in that environment. So that was some of the disadvantages for home working for the employer. And some disadvantages to the employee was isolation. People go to work sometimes as a part of a social network. And when they stop by your office and have a conversation, or they stop for a cup of coffee, or they take their coffee break, that social interaction is something that we as humans enjoy. So isolation could be a disadvantage. Domestic intrusions, suddenly sitting at your desk, you see a cobweb in a corner that you wanted to clean, and then suddenly you're up and gone, or some kid wants something, or people believing that you're home want to stop by and drop by, that kind of thing. It talks about space requirements. It talks about health and safety implications using your private home for work. It also talks about employees feeling that they have no particular rights once they remove from the office environment. And so everything to do with home working, there are some pros and cons with it. I know an organization that has made a lot of their employees subcontractors, and that is working out beautifully because they get paid on their technicians, and they get paid on the level of service that they give their customers. And as a result of how well that is working, the company is actually getting to the place where they're thinking about selling their building. They don't need that big building anymore. And so they're actually seeing cost savings with operating with the technicians and subcontractors. So make sure that you go over that page on page 84, because it talks about those things that can be pros and cons of organization. The other thing that organizations are looking at is how they can automate and use technology, or what they call the digital transformation, and the things that they can do to cut costs. In a lot of these cases, putting in the infrastructure is the heaviest of costs. Once that's in, it's supposed to work like a charm. And we see a lot of internet phones now. You can speak to somebody online with a headset and you're calling for information and whatever have you. There'll be a greater dependency on electronics. I've also seen in the newspaper where the central bank has had or started a conversation where by the end of 2024, I think it was, that they would be reducing the checks. And in a check environment, the question becomes, what will that mean for businesses? And not necessarily paying their employees, but the vendors and the suppliers and the service people who cater to that particular organization. We're going to see more and more of that. And I wonder if the financial institutions are thinking about the safety of their customers when they have them lining up outside the banks waiting to get in. Because one very ingenious, unscrupulous robber on a moped could drive along, snatch a bag, and you're standing here in awe while he's heading down a one-way street with your bag in hand. Especially if you notice that you normally come to that same bank at a particular certain time. Whilst we are going about our day, the criminals are looking and waiting for opportunities to do things. And it suggests that, and I don't know the percentage of retail owners who have the banking online or late at night, but or the what they call the night deposits. But it could be a safety issue. Tamiko, I see your hand up.
Ms. Fraser, you could correct me if I'm wrong, right? But I feel as though a lot of these companies are using this COVID as an excuse for poor customer service. They don't want to hire enough staff. They want to put a drill load of work on these skeleton shift staff that they have, 1-2 people. You go in the bank, you didn't stand with 2, less like you say, stand outside, anybody could walk up, grab your bag or whatever the case may be. When you reach inside 2 tellers, you may see 3 on a very good day. They have them overworked, underpaid, but you get all this money coming in. Like and management, from what I see, I've yet to see a manager come out on the floor. And customer service, you get a drill load of people opening up accounts, but you don't help people to facilitate the accounts. The security, he just act like he's management when he come out there.
Hold on now, hold on.
Yeah, listen.
That's my security. My security
Act as though they are management. And I would say to my because where is the manager?
They are managing whether or not you come inside the door.
No, the point I'm trying to say is, y'all get cameras, right? Do you not see the line round the corner through the bush down the road? Like, seriously, or at any point in time are you gonna come out and say, even like the young lady said a minute ago, that she normally just come out and she go and see how best she could assist customers and stuff like that. You go, and I call a name now, you go to BOB, don't go Hall Road. It's cheaper, you just go home. Go back to work, go do something I can't even pay nobody to go to BOB for me, and I normally will pay them because I don't want to go on the line.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you can't, you can't be collecting money. You can't be collecting that type of money, and you can't up your game on customer service. You get 2 tellers inside the store. Don't go to Fidelity in Palmdale.
Everybody get through on the bus.
I tell you what,
10 people sitting in the customer service, 20 people on the line. Nobody, the customer service helping nobody.
Well, I tell you what.
Why I don't take lunch break.
I have been advised that they are looking at ways to better their customer service, especially with competition as strong as it is, with, unless you all believe that everybody's doing the same thing. There's no
they had hold back on that Christmas bonus for management, not the staff, because they didn't work them. Give them what you get for them. For management, 2022 January, we would have been in good standing.
Okay. So you don't see the future effects of information technology?
I feel as though everybody is not at that point to receive. What is it? Because example, my mom, she's not putting her money in the ATM. She still want her book. Thank God. Commonwealth Bank still is give her a book and they just update that for her. Like these older people. Yes, she still has her book. You must be old, but the old people get books. My mommy have a book.
Wow. That is.
They accommodate her. They accommodate her. That's what I call excellent customer service. Like you have KYC, you have some customers, irregardless of whatever they say, oh, get with the time. These old people ain't getting with no time. They need to see their money on their account. If they send their child to go put money on their account, they want to see that on their account. They want to see that book in their hand.
But the question becomes, those who are not prepared to do business in the way where technology is coming down the pipeline, they could be left behind, or they have to end up having to, because the argument that the financial services people have is some of these same old people who don't want to move with the times of technology. They somehow end up in the gaming houses using technology.
That's spinning, man.
So it is, let's see how we can incentivize people to move in that particular area. Or you would find that what happens is they would call their granddaughter or call their daughter and say, do this for me. And that ends up happening as opposed to standing up online. And some banks have gotten to the place where they say, okay, we will serve the senior citizens between 9 and whatever o'clock. So
but you do realize to the number place ain't no line?
There ain't no line.
Okay.
You said that to say what?
They got the staff and machinery.
Exactly. They come. I don't do number because my money's scared. But the point I'm trying to say is, when I do pass, you go in, you get out. They like clockwork, like they on the ball.
So what technology do they have that the financial institutions do not have?
They don't have no skeleton ship in there. Management paying attention in there. Because management have the answer to the upper boss. They don't, you have some people where money talks. If I'm paying you a good salary, I expect to get good service. If you're not, my boss used to always say, you get what you pay for. He said, if you don't pay people to do a good job, don't expect for them to do a good job. He said, now when you pay people and you pay them properly, they come to work and they work. You can't hire somebody, overwork them, tell them they're on contract, so you have no benefits whatsoever. Like, come on. You like you said earlier, Your staff happy, your staff will go over and beyond for you.
Yeah, yeah.
They will go over and beyond for you. But if you got a nitpick at everything, how much minutes that person come late and stuff like that off a lunch break, or, and now mind you now, that person work may start 9 o'clock. They've been on your job from 7:30, because you have some people don't like traffic, so they come in extra early. They there an hour or two. They clock in 5 minutes late. Oh, you write that down. Like, yeah, come on.
It's the 3 C's. Control, command. Oh man. Okay, I enjoyed this today.
Well, I could tell you, technology is here. The digital transformation is here. The things that information age is going to cause to happen is that information, you got to have to know your rights and obligations using technology. Cybersecurity is a big thing now. They have a lot of people in that space actually making sure that your information is secure and your login credentials are secure. You have to know how to contact with other members of the organization or someone using the same platform. And a lot of the vendors are now putting kiosks in these high traffic areas, like the airports and supermarkets, and actually the malls. And so it's making access to, and I think I heard recently at NAD, at the airport, they were saying their parking is going to go cashless. And if you don't have any, if you don't have a card, a debit or credit card, you can actually go inside and pay for a temporary card, put the money in and get a card loaded up, and then you can come back out and use that card in the parking lot, because they are concerned about the safety of their employees at the entrances of the parking lot. And so as you go about your way, you are going to have to think about the businesses that you frequent and whether or not they would be open to using cash. Bahama, for instance, don't use cash in none of their facilities, or even at their kiosks for just parking your vehicle. You have to have a card. So it's not going to be a fish fry. And the people who do not have a card is going to have to be traveling with somebody who has a card in order to get any of their amenities. And so it is, who are you catering to? What is the accountability? What is the control that is in place? What is the damage to reputation of any abuses of technology? Where you had international conversations about credit cards being exposed to the criminal element, or they getting information on your credit cards and actually accessing your bank accounts and shopping for purchases. And so you've seen banks do second level. I had to recently had to activate my credit card, and I couldn't, for some reason, when I was in the bank to collect it, I asked them to activate it, and they told me that I could call to activate the number on the back of the card. But I figured if I'm in front of you with my card in hand, why don't you just activate it right here and there? But that was another story. When I called the number to activate the card, I think they asked me at least 9 questions about what they thought was on file before they actually patched me to an area where I could activate the card. So there's different levels of security that's being exercised at some banks, and the control of spam, and organizations have to look at, if I'm going to be using technology, what is the chances of my employee abusing the facility in which I have in place? We've seen an increase in pornographic sites on business computers and whatever have you. So much so that a lot of organizations now have a computer use policy as to what you can use their company machines for. Even if you take them home, what they have surveillance on the company machines, and they are looking for and seeing what sites that you visit and whatever have you. And you have to sign a documentation of understanding and accepting the computer policy. All of these things play a role in the information technology and how these things are relevant inside an organization. So that all we've discussed so far is the social connection between employees and organization. And last week we talked about how organizations have a social corporate responsibility. And you see where that might come in the form of adopting a park or cleaning of some particular area or participating in a particular charity. Keeping in mind that this chapter was on social and environmental responsibilities. So I want to shift gears now and talk about the environmental issues. And all of the things is much of the debate focuses on global warming right now, climate change, which most now accept is either caused or accelerated by human activity. And the world is warming gradually, and as a result, causing shift in not only eroding some countries' shorelines, etc. And this has implications for the whole wider responsibility of climate change on the quality of life in the future. And we have companies like the Bahamas National Trust. We have like Save the Base. We have the Bahamian Environmental Protection Foundation. Most of them are nonprofit organizations whose job function it is to manage and participate at the protection of the environment. The National Trust, for example, actually have 32 national parks that they are responsible for. And they mention their goal is to effectively managing national parks to conserve and protect Bahamian national resources. And so those kinds of things are what they say they do. And you have other organizations who actually look at being the raising awareness in the media and taking legal action against organizations that they feel might have a negative impact on the environment itself. And when we talk about it, we look at what's happening in Bimini, for example. We talk about and heard a lot about the Disney exposure in Eleuthera, Bamsey and Andros, Artec Bakes and Andros, the Freeport Container Port, those things that are happening. And what will the Port Association, the new port development, happen and do to the downtown Nassau area and Clifton Key in terms of the heritage, the actual heritage park out there. What is the impact? What companies have locally done and how companies affect the environment and leave their what we call environmental footprint. What that means is the impact of a business on the environment. How do they get away with their waste? We've had conversations about what the cruise ships are doing in terms of dumping and getting rid of their waste. The role of these different organizations in impacting the community. We also talk about energy, the renewable energy, and the ongoing saga with BPL and things like that. How do you move towards renewable energy? How do you move towards what they call the solar paneling and all that kind of alternative energy ideas that are around, and the impact of electric cars and whatever have you. Organizations, when they think about impacting the community and leaving their footprint on the environment, all of these things come to mind. And one of the main things of environmental policy is to reduce the footprint itself and to ensure that the footprint, the environmental footprint is washed away as quickly as possible. We also talked about at health, where they talked about oil drilling in the Bahamas. What would that mean? What is the potential for any oil spills? What would that mean? We talk, make greater use of renewable energy resources. That again, all of that speaks to an organization's impact. And do we have any factories in the Bahamas, Nassau as opposed to the outer islands? I remember in Freeport, there used to be Borco, which was an oil refinery company. All of that is what organizations want to think about, want to have, and also look at from that perspective. So keep in mind, an environmental footprint is the impact that an organization will have on the environment in which they work and which they live. Are there the factory out west? So what is it? Commonwealth Brewery. Do they have any smoke emitting from any of those things that any of they operate? All of that should be looked at, and a risk assessment should be done. If there's any new development, the impact, the economic, the environmental impact of that organization to the neighborhood and the coastline and the fish and the marine life, all of that should be part and parcel of assessment or feasibility study if any of those organizations are wanting to come into the country. So to give my voice a break, and I know I have two persons at least who have the actual book in hand, and I have 5 people on board. I want to look at, on page 93, there's a case study. And at the end of the case study, there's 3 questions as it relates to that case study. And so I would like, both of you will be doing both groups will be doing the same case study. I'm going to organize the breakout rooms. You're going to be doing the same case study, but you're going to be answering different questions from the case study. The first question is, in the context of the stakeholders, examine the ethical considerations relating to the proposal to switch from domestic suppliers to alternative suppliers in developing countries. And so all of that is in the case study, so you can answer that question. That'll be question number 1. And I will skip the second question. We'll talk about that as a group. And then question number 2 would be the last question on page 94, which says, explain the ethical issues relating to the leaking of confidential information by an employee to the newspaper. We had something similar before, and so that should be an easier one. But I want you to confine yourself to the case study that is on page 93. And then when you come back, you will come back to answer those questions that are being presented right now. So if you give me just a sec, I will organize the breakout room for you. And then you could discuss that case study on page 93, answering question 1 and question 3. The second group will answer question 3. And we'll talk about the second question as a group when we come back in. Okay, let's see here. Okay, we are back. Who is volunteering? Which group is volunteering to go first?
Chanquel, you want to go first?
I mean, we wasn't technically finished, so you could tag team.
Okay, go ahead. I'll let you start.
Okay. So the gist of the case study was this publicly listed company who services their community with garden products. They have some things in place, which is a policy of voluntary disclosure on matters relating to the environment and they have a self-proclaimed corporate social responsibility to lessen the carbon footprint. So our question was, explain, okay, so they had a brainstorming meeting as well to try to outsource some of their material that was becoming too expensive, which would have gone against, I guess, their corporate social responsibility. So our question was to examine the ethical issues related to the leaking of the confidential information by the employee to the newspaper. So off the bat, because it was just a brainstorming meeting, we have agreed upon the employee was in the wrong for going to the newspaper with this information because it wasn't solidified or anything was agreed upon with the board of directors or the company. It was just literally them going over ideas. We also would have spoken about the fact that they had this policy of voluntary disclosure to support their good governance. Now, I know you were saying the corporate culture of a organization would dictate how people act or how they fall in line based on how the company operates. So in that, it was kind of a discussion on, was the employee trying to adhere to this corporate culture that they were enlisting to say they're voluntarily disclosing this information because it may have a potential impact on the environment. But in the end, we would have decided that because it wasn't anything set in stone, it should not have been leaked to the newspaper. Do you have anything else to add, Kendra?
Oh, that's it. That's it.
Okay. So question, did the employee act ethically?
No.
No.
But just with common sense in that you know the company you work for, you know what their beliefs were. It's outlined at the beginning of the whole case study, speaking that they voluntarily, not only voluntarily, they're a public trading company as well. So that information would have been open to the stakeholders. And they were just looking at the initial stages of just researching what are our possible options of offsetting the cost of goods or retaining more revenue. So unless you know that there is a culture of them being deceptive, I really can't see a person being justified ethically in releasing this information because everything was in its infancy stages. They were just looking at options at that particular point in time.
So keeping in mind that what was driving the discussion for the organization was that for 2 years, their profit margins had fallen due to increased competition and a failure to control costs of goods sold. And so they were having the discussion, and there were 20 employees who were actually having the discussion. So the employee has acted unethically. They disclosed information to a third party in contravention of their fiduciary duty of confidentiality that all employees have to their employers. And this duty may be further compromised if the employee concerned has an explicit duty written into his or her contract of employment. And generally, that's a statement that is in a lot of contracts nowadays, where information you gather in the company is expected to be held confidentially. So the employee may argue that a duty to society overrides a duty to the company. But in this case, the employee does not seem to have checked the facts, as the company has not yet decided on its policy, but is simply discussing future alternative policies in the moment. The result of this is that the incomplete information has resulted in incomplete and possibly inaccurate information being made available to the public through the columns of the newspaper. So the employee has made an assumption that an executive decision has been taken and has chosen to leak the details regardless of the consequences. The employee action seems to be contrary to basic ethical values, such as integrity and judgment. If the information was factually correct, it is possible to try to justify the disclosure on the grounds of public interest or a duty to the public, in other words, the deontological view, which is the duty bound, but it is necessary to make sure that the information is correct in the first instance. The company itself must bear some of the responsibility of the distorted and incomplete information falling into the hands of the newspaper. That the information was available in this way is a clear failure of a control at executive level. And this case suggests that perhaps 20 persons could have been the source of the leak. And this is a major problem that is to be addressed immediately. For example, considering the possibility that confidential information on business strategy became available to a person who was about to move to a major competitor. So those are the issues to be considered in that particular case of the leaking of the confidential information. Okay, thank you guys ever so much. Next group 1. Who is the spokesperson for group 1?
Okay, our question was, in the context of the stakeholders of Home Worker PLC, examine the ethical considerations relating to the proposal to switch from domestic suppliers to alternate suppliers in developing countries. Now, it was only recommended and it was up for debate by the directors, but they also expressed concerns about the image in the home market will be damaged by the loss of business to the domestic suppliers, and that the contract was making up over 70% of the supplier's business. Now, in the policy, their statement includes a commitment to minimize the adverse impact of the company's activities on the natural environment. Here it is that they're looking at going with a company that is also known to clear forest areas, causing damage to the ecosystem. And I feel like that goes against what they're trying to portray as their mission statement. So for them to go with that company makes them like look a little bad in the sense that what you say isn't what you're actually doing. And if you're supposed to be, why would you, just because of the loss, just because the cost of importing the stuff is at a lower cost, you're taking away so much from your home suppliers, which will cause them in an event or in the long run to actually go out of business. And you know how that feels when in the last 2 years, you had a decline in your goods sold. Anyone else want to add?
No, you're good.
Also, they had in their statement say that they wanted to become carbon
neutral,
right? Mm-hmm. But yet they're looking at a company providing the items that they need out of wood. So that is, you're going to go take down the forest because you need this wood to supply me.
Mm-hmm.
Just to reduce costs.
So if you're looking from an environmental impact only, that would be a consideration, that would be a concern.
That would be a big concern. I think that's the person was the whistleblower, must he, you know what I'm saying, would it be picket fencing and thing undercover, but they ain't say.
Okay, understood. Let's look at it. Let's look at the facts. There is nothing unethical about choosing suppliers in countries other than that in which the company is based. On a pure perspective, there's nothing unethical about that. Providing the action of the company are consistent with its objectives and to take due account of the stakeholders' needs. So a large public company would be foolish to give an absolute and open-ended commitment to source its goods from the domestic market only, because their responsibility to their shareholders and their stakeholders is to operate at a profitable perspective, okay? And so it does not mean that just looking at alternative suppliers in and of itself is an unethical decision. However, we are told in the case study that home worker is encountering specific difficulties in relationship to gross profit margin, caused in some measures by cost of inputs increasing faster than turnover. As the company has a duty to increase or at least maintain shareholders' value, it has a duty to the shareholders to pay due attention to the financial performance of the company. And so taking the duty-bound approach, we have to ask what the consequences would be to the company of not considering alternative lower-cost sources of inputs. The buyers will certainly not be doing their jobs properly. The performance of the company will continue to deteriorate. And ultimately, this could lead to a situation where all suppliers would suffer a partial or even complete loss of business. So the company has adopted a utilitarian view by seeking to maximize benefits to the majority of the shareholders. That's on one side. Now, switching to suppliers would be unethical if this action was contrary to any commitments laid down in the corporate social responsibility policy or inconsistent with any actual commitment given to existing suppliers. So they're giving you the two sides of the coin, okay? In either case, this would compromise the integrity of the company. However, if the corporate social responsibility policy is drafted wisely, it should not tie down the directors to purchasing from specific sources or even specific countries. Essentially, the directors must balance their responsibility to suppliers with their responsibility to other stakeholders. And it could be argued that switching suppliers is a natural evolutionary process in most companies. And there is no reason why the suppliers who lose contracts now will not benefit from future business. So if it went against some stated corporate social responsibility that they have set out in their mandate, then it could be unethical. But it didn't have to be. And switching to another country in and of itself, it does not make it unethical. Okay, I think you guys cover that very well. On page 98, let's talk about reputational risk. What do you think that means? Anyone?
Bad press. I.e. Royal Bank and the $20 bills with the ATM, Royal Bank with not taking deposits over the counter.
And I tell you, don't call no company name.
You did say, Your Worship, you did say if it is public knowledge and if it's in the public and in the press, it could be cited as an example, Your Worship.
Yes, I did. I did say that. If it's in the public domain, you are free to discuss it.
Yeah, yes. That's my contribution, Your Worship.
Reputational risk. And that reputational risk goes back to that conversation we had where what you do outside of the 9 to 5 could impact your tenure with a particular organization. If what you have done is sufficient to impact the reputation of that organization, bad publicity, bad press, how you conduct yourself, especially at a managerial level, it can be a concern enough for the organization to terminate you. When we look at the ecosystem in our country, we have to look at, and I saw recently where people were packaging the crab meat from Andros. And the issue that came up with the proper packaging of fresh fish as opposed to cooked fish, and the shelf life and the labeling of those packages, all of that comes into play. And particularly in the whole pandemic environment, how will it affect the communities? And the difference between a pandemic and an epidemic is that epidemic is a large number of people within a particular community or population or region where a pandemic is prevalent over the whole world. So we have been hit with a pandemic as a result of COVID-19. A lot of the standards that were in place in the past, I'm sure is going to be affected. On page 101, we have the Global Reporting Initiative. And this group are actually experts who pool their knowledge and skills and research and resources to address the need to tackle the failure of existing corporate governance structures and to deal with changes in the global community. So it's membership-based and it's open to multinational corporations as well as small businesses. And their subscription is based on the size of the business. And so they are actually interested in transparency, accountability, reporting, and sustainable development. They look for best practices around the world, and their mission is to deliver the highest level of transparency for organizational impact on the economy. And it's not only the environment, but the financial economy and the people of a particular area as well. So they might get involved with biodiversity, taxes, waste management, emissions of gases, and those standards as relates to that. Particularly in that particular section, I would just want you to be familiar with this initiative and what it aims to do to develop. And then on page 103, you could skip that full cost accounting. We're not going to be talking about that and the costs associated with these initiatives. So you could skip straight to page 105, which talks about environmental management systems. And what these are is systems which enable the company to identify the impact that its action have directly or indirectly on the environment. Where are we dumping our waste? Where are we? What are we doing to the water table? What are we doing to the erosion of the seawalls and the seabeds and the marine life around that particular area? A lot of the things that are on the coastal plain will have to give environmental impact studies as to how they would affect individual islands or anything like that. And to set targets for the enhancements of those activities that would benefit the environment and reduce the threats to the environment by activities known to be harmful. Kendrick, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, ma'am. I was wondering, you said page 101, GRI, and full cost accounting, 103 and 105.
No. I'm saying when you finish the topic on the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, you could skip the full accounting on page 103.
Okay.
We're not going to deal with that at all for the purpose of our exams and the course itself. And you could go straight to page 105, still talking about environment and the environmental management systems.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm trying to help you to wade through all this reading that you would have to do. So environmental management systems is all of those things that enable a company to identify the impact of their organization to the environment. Yes, Kendrick?
No, I was saying thumbs up.
Oh, that's a thumbs up. Okay, great stuff. It also talks about any policy development, ensuring that the policies of the organization are compliant with acceptable external, compliant with accepted external imposed or formulated standards, and the objectives and the target development should be precise as possible and measurable, enabling appropriate feedback to be generated and available for ongoing review and improvement. And it would help if any organization that is interested in building out something new, they should probably always have communication with the relative stakeholders and the community at large, and let them to understand the level of assessment that they will be going into, and what are some of the things that they will do to guarantee that the impact to the community and the environment is minimal at best, and not just because I buy this island, I can do whatever I want on this island, and not look at how it impacts the whole archipelago of islands. Because the seas around us are very much alive with food. And so if they are impacted negatively, or some of the wildlife and marine life is impacted negatively, we want to know that, and we want to understand what that might mean. And they review all the environmental impact on a regular basis, including assessments and future initiatives. And so the waste minimization and elimination of pollution, what are they going to do for pollution prevention? They should have this ongoing research, development, and investment to cleaner technologies, and also to the performance and reporting of the benefits of these organizations. And that actually covers that. And on page 107, the International Standardization Organization is a standard that is recognized as applying to specific criteria. The standards relevant to environmental systems and set out their codings are based on quality management and the publication of an environmental policy statement. They actually get involved with the assessment of environmental issues and assessment of mandatory obligation imposed by laws and regulation. And we have these laws and regulations on our books as well. And that should be part and parcel to any proposal that these organizations might be interested in investing or building or extending their present situation. Because we have a lot of international investors, I call them, who want to purchase keys and islands and whatever have you in our archipelago. We should make it at all time our business to know exactly what they plan to do with it, and what they plan to do with it is going to impact the relevant islands around. On page 108 is the Coalition for Environmentally Responsible Economics, and they list their code of conduct. It'd be good to know basically what that organization is about and how they plan to conduct themselves and what corrective actions they plan to address any cause harm to the environment. And so you need to know what are their basic principles that they've adopted in their code of ethics. And lastly, in this particular chapter, what we will discuss and want to make sure that you are aware of is keeping in line with the environmental policy statement. And the policy statement is responsible for monitoring and complying with it. And it can be constructed around the principles of CERIS or any other appropriate model that you want to use, and keeping in line with the GRI as well. So it has to be a very comprehensive document, and it should come from the top. So too should be responsible for monitoring and compliance with it. And so your CEO and your board of directors is actually putting out this statement, and this may be a role of the board of directors to actually make sure that they have some audit committee in place who should monitor the environmental issues, any proposed legislations and regulations, and any movement in those regulations to make sure that they are always in compliance, and any changes in best practices. I've noticed in my general movement around some of the islands that a lot of the keys and out islands development use a lot of solar solar energy, for electricity and so on. What does that mean to the organization? What does that mean to the country? How that impacts or in our main grid, or does it come into our main grid? Anything of those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of conversation and questions that need to be asked, and a policy statement with all transparency included in that, taking consideration the attitude of stakeholders. Some people might say, well, I have plenty of money and I should be able to just get one of these little islands or keys and do as much as I please once I already got the green light. But it is up to our administration, our government administration, to keep in contact with what is happening, what's being done, what is emanating from that particular area, because, and particularly in this environment in which we live today, where there's so much things happening by way of human smuggling, for example, by way of illegal drug trafficking, and even terrorist financing. We have to be very vigilant about who is coming in and out of the country and what are they doing on these remote islands. And it's very difficult for any administration to manage and properly have surveillance for all the little islands and keys and rocks that are out there where people can actually set up shop. And if once they're not making contact to the mainland nearby, what are they doing? We need to know. So it's really difficult for any administration because the proper resources and infrastructure may not be in place to carry out the proper surveillance. In terms of social audit, these audits seek to determine whether an organization is compliant with legal and regulatory requirements, as well as codes of best practice and its own internal formulated policies. And so they are looking for them to be good corporate citizens. And the social audits may consider the consumption of resources, terms and conditions of employment. And again, if you're talking about a resort type or a boutique hotel kind of scenario, we would like to want to know what is the terms and condition of our people, the condition in which they will be working, what work processes they'll be involved in, and keeping the employee welfare and the arrangement of employees always uppermost in our minds, and the health and safety of our employees and the human resource management policies, and in particular in regard to equality and diversity, especially in this gender and generational context in which we have in the country now. So all of that is on the social audit side of things. And like the word says, it's an audit, so it should be asking any kind of questions, finding out the answers, evaluating the rationale and relevance of any activities deemed by the organization to be socially responsible, determine where the policies and actions are consistent with company values, mission, beliefs, and organizational culture, and also to looking at the priorities of like objectives within the plans of the organization. And like Tamiko said in her comment, there are some organizations who I heard about recently, and was a really financially stable investor who actually was talking to the employees in such a way that was derogatory. And he actually mentioned comments or made comments about this is how we do it in another country. And the employees were well put off by that. And of course, productivity went, and they actually started to not be so engaged and actually what to do. The issue that came up was the amount of hours that the employees were actually working, and them wanting the employees to work on Saturdays and Sundays, which are traditional time off days. And if they do work, not wanting to pay the double time or time and a half, as our act actually speaks to. And I have keen interest in how that case would turn out, because it has been reported, and there are some issues that are being dealt with as we speak. So persons coming from other countries where they might run sweatshops, for example, or they might have younger workers, or they might have people working 100-hour weeks. They must understand that they cannot bring those same kinds of standards here in the Bahamas, because we do have legislation on our books that speaks directly to how much time an individual can work and whether or not they are properly compensated for that. And the issue that came to light was that there was one particular employee who had worked for like 2 or 3 years without having a day off. And then when they questioned it, the employer was concerned about it to say, well, we pay you for the time that you're working. And the employee's argument was there should be double time for holidays and time and a half for time over and above the 40-hour week. So that kind of measurements and specific objectives and time frames and evaluation of the organization's involvement and performances in relation to all those things above is what should be a part of the social audit for that organization. And lastly, the environmental audit, it actually assessed the organization's performance in relationship to legal and regulatory requirements, as well as codes of best practice and internal constructive policies and procedures as it impacts the environment, and a structured framework of how they should be conducted regularly with outcomes documented. So not only am I supposed to assess, I'm supposed to keep track of what was the result of my assessment. And this might include surveys being done, analysis taking stock of the organization's strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, adoption of standards and initiatives relating to quality, and eco-audit and eco-labeling to make sure that people are notified about what's happening. We also had application of audits running parallel to a certain development. If you were given, say for instance, you were given approval for a cottage style environment with a view to running the business, and after about 3 or 4 years, you decided I want to add on a 2-story property that's good. I mean, 2-story building that's going to be used for, let's say, a spa or that kind of treatment or whatever have you. All of that should be now having to be reassessed because the initial purpose of the property is now changed a little bit, and you have more traffic of people coming in and more exposure to the general public. And all of this comes as a part of the next audit, and it should be effective and necessary for the directors and senior management to have a reasonably completed grasp of all the issues that might be related to it. So the policies have to be formulated on the basis of the facts and the evaluation of those facts. And this also implies the need to prioritize the outcome. How much time would it take to bill out? How much time, if we have a leak or if we have a spill, how will we mitigate the losses, and how we do the cleanup, and what would be those things that we would need to do. And so if there's any need for any new implementation and any new review, this says that it's going to be an ongoing situation, and always an ongoing situation. So the key to this, and keep in mind that this chapter was speaking about the impact of social and environmental responsibilities by an organization. And yes, organizations should be looking out for the health and safety of all their employees. And some organizations have taken it a step further and have incorporated a whole wellness program. Wellness being disseminating of information relative to food, health, exercise, sleep, alcoholism, mental wellness, as well as knowing your basic chronic illnesses and getting regular checkup and making checkup available for their staff in order to make sure that their whole employees are operating at maximum capacity at all times. And the benefit for the organization is that they will have well-managed, well-engaged, happy employees. And once that happens, and once they are taken good care of, the impact to the organization is increased productivity. And that's what every organization should be really working towards. How do we get the best out of our people? Because it's not just a slogan. People are our number one assets. Any strategy or structure that you want to put in place, you need people to carry out the objectives and the missions and the vision of the organization. And it's the employees who are people who are going to be impacting your customers, who again are people. And so to make sure that your people are serving your people in the best way possible, which is good customer service. And good customer service means increased sales. No one leaves an organization when they're feeling comfortable, well compensated, well engaged, what's the word I'm looking for? Recognized for their contribution to the organization. And it should not be a social promotion as opposed to a promotion for a job well done. So against that background, do we have any questions as we get ready to wrap up this evening?
So, Ms. Fraser, you gave us a little print or a little lineup of what to be on that exam.
I've been telling you all along. I've already said in chapter 1 and chapter 2, what are those key areas? If we are all human, yeah? If you see me actually go to a particular area and spend some time on that particular area, that should suggest to you that that's important to you. And anything that's important to you could very well be on the exam. I specifically said not to worry about the full cost accounting because that will not be a part of XYZ. So the key is to make sure that you attend the sessions and you see the areas that I stick a pin in on. I will tell you though, you will not be able to pass this exam if you do not read the book, if you don't have access to the book, because I'm making specific references to specific pages in the book itself. So the different approaches to ethics, you definitely need to know, because they will come in some shape, size, or form, and they will actually help you to answer your case studies that will be on the exam, because you could very well say, from the teleological perspective, here is what I think should happen, blah, 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 blah. And that shows me that you understand what that theory is about, what that approach is. And that approach really talks about what are the consequences of the actions taking place, and whether the consequences makes it right or wrong. Is it ethical or unethical based on the consequences of the behavior. So that's as much as I could do. Other than that, it would not be ethical for me to say this will and this will not be. But the format of the exam will be true, false, short definitions, and analyzing a few cases at the back. So it's usually three segments of the test itself, and it's expected to be over a 3-hour period. So the good thing about the true false section is that you got a 50% chance of getting the answer right, just by guessing. But what this class is all about is common sense approaches to the whole question of ethics and what is right and wrong from a universal perspective, and what could be right or wrong from some legislation or some regulation that we have on the books. And keeping in mind that the institute is the Institute for Financial Services. A lot of the examples would be what you would find in the banking arena or financial companies. But the principles as relate to ethics apply across the board to any organization, because if you have a dishonest person working for you, no matter what system you put in place, that person is going to find something dishonest to do. So a lot of it depends on the basic character of the individuals themselves and what they bring to the table. Because no organization could be watching every employee 9 to 5, 365 a day. And some things that we take for granted over the years, that has happened over the years. I'll give you an example. If you are the custodian of the company's resources, that includes their pens, their pencils, the paper, etc. And they should be used for the benefit of the organization. So if you decide, this is our pastor anniversary and we're having this big thing at our church, and I need to go in and make 150 copies of this brochure or this agenda or program that we're having on Sunday, and I sneak into the office on a Saturday afternoon and just run them all off. That is not ethical, because you're not using the resources of the organization for the organization's benefit. And that's really, and sometimes we don't even think about it because it happens so often. I'm involved in this scenario outside of organization, and I'm going to use the company's resources for something else. People don't think about it, supplies that are there for the benefit of the organization is being used in your personal capacity. And what comes to mind as I say that is the use of a company car. Unless it is expressly expressed in the agreement to you that you can use it in your personal capacity. You get a car at a certain level and you can use it as you will. That's one thing. But if it's a company car, when you leave work on Friday, the company car should be parked in, because you're not doing company work on a Saturday and Sunday.
It should be parked, but it's not.
So that's a little dicey situation that I've seen around, and so much so that some companies had to put on their no riders on their vehicles. So you can't be picking up your friend and stopping over at Arawaki and having a few cocktails or whatever have you, because you're not in the course of your employment when you do those things. And when 5 o'clock comes, the car should be parked. I hear Kendrick is silent on that, but I'll leave him alone in that regard.
Yeah, park in somebody's driveway.
Outside future.
Or I take the company car home and my husband ends up driving the company car to do whatever it is that he wants to do. He is not an employee of the company and he should not be driving the company's cars because it's not.
Plate is.
Sorry?
Wonder what color that plate is.
I only sent him to the shop, Miss Frazier. I needed something from the shop.
Okay. Company property should be used for the benefit of the organization and by company employees.
If it benefits the home, it benefits me and I work for the company. That's how most of them think.
Okay. I don't think they give it a thought. It's just almost automatic. And think about the amount of gas that is used in the vehicle that is not for the benefit of the organization. Especially if I have a gas allowance, I can just pull up and sign for it. Then somebody in the organization should be looking at why is Tom, who has the same vehicle, spending $50 a week, and John, who has the same kind of vehicle and in the same capacity, is spending $100 a week.
He live further out.
Exactly. What it is no right or wrong. It is someone should be taking note and it being a part of the audit process and being part of an understanding of what it is that is happening and what it is that's been going. And some companies will say, use your own car to go do company business. And if what happens if you say, well, that's not the arrangement or that's not the agreement, or I will do that if you purchase gas for the car. You know, there's always ways to work it out. And once all parties are transparent to what is happening, then it is okay. And that's something to be negotiated, XYZ, for that purpose. But this course is to make you more aware of the ethical dilemma that you might find yourself in.
Ms. Fraser, you think if there was consequences for action, like you say, make notation of whether you come to the pump once or twice or 3 times. If I come to the pump every day and I have no consequences for my action, what's the purpose of writing it down if it's not going to be addressed? Some people just are not going to touch or step on certain people's toes. That's why you see, I'm not going to call a color plate, where you see children sometimes, young kids driving this plate, this car with this particular plate, you know, like you say, 9 to 5, when you get off 5 o'clock, park the company car. If you're in upper management, you should be getting paid a good salary to purchase a vehicle, you know, whether you want to purchase a Tada or you want to purchase yourself a Mercedes, whatever. But, you know, that would save the company a lot of money too.
And in the best world, that works. But we have gotten away with doing it so often that I think they are desensitized to the relationship of what my action is actually costing the company, and do I really care to that all of these affect how productive and how what's the word, not only productive, but how financially secure the companies actually are. A few years back, someone made the comment to me that this person steal themselves out of a job. And I had to scratch my head to think about that. But if you continually use and misappropriate companies' properties, the expenses will continue to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And then somebody's going to say, this company is not profitable. And not only you are out of a job, all the other employees that is working with that organization is now out of a job based on behavior that could have been corrected a whole lot earlier. And
sorry, go ahead. Most of the time, the only time you see action is taken and people are held accountable is when new management comes and that isn't familiar with who you are. Like, you have some companies, I have a name, they'll say, oh, that's Tamiko. The other person, new people come in, that's a cashier, that's the accountant, that's the person who does answer the phone, that's HR. Nobody has a name, everybody has a title. So when they address you as a title, they hold you accountable. They come to work. If the company isn't making any money, whoever costing the company, they let them go, whether they have been there a year, 20 years. But that most of the time, that's only when you have new management. Because like I say, when it comes to certain people in an organization, you don't touch them. You see like you don't see, even though they are costing the company.
Yeah, I think every organization should have what we call a return on our investment. How much is this company, how much is this person costing me, as opposed to how much are they benefiting me? What are they doing in terms of bringing in revenue compared to the cost of keeping them? And organizations will be making those decisions very and in a slow economy, people pay more attention to those kinds of questions, and that's where downsizing come in. I finally had 100 employees. I cannot afford to keep 100, so I'm going with the best 75, and they pay off 25. It's unfortunate, but it's a natural behavior as finances and profitability it starts to decrease. People, organizations are in existence to make a profit for their shareholders and stakeholders. And so if over and repeatedly we are not in a profit scenario, then there's going to be decisions to be made, and decisions are going to have to happen, which might negatively impact some of the employees on board. And it might even negatively impact good employees. During the COVID environment, we saw a lot of companies that actually just closed up shop. You know? And so there's always something mindful to think about. I'm making a contribution to this organization. Either I am contributing to the organization's remaining open, or I am contributing to the possibility of this organization closing down. And so by my actions, I'm either helping or hindering. And if every employee took that position, then you'd have a better, more productive group of employees who are willing and able to make an impact with that organization and to take it to the next level. But that comes from the mission and the vision being properly communicated, and the objectives of the organization being properly communicated to all employees on board. Are there any other questions? Concerns? Okay. If there are none, I would just like to remind you to send in the case studies that you're going to be working on, just to me directly, just to make sure I can make sure that that everybody's not doing the same thing, or more than one individuals are doing it, and then I could direct you accordingly. But the case studies are due by 12 noon on the 3rd of March. So you actually have exactly 4 weeks to actually put it together and print it out nice and neatly. And you can send it to me by my email address. And I will have the responsibility of printing it off on my end. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. And so again, like always, I'd expect that we're going to have an opportunity to do a quick review before the midterm exam, I'm hoping. But I will also invite opportunities to, if you read information in a particular chapter and you want us to go over it because of understanding or clarity or whatever have you, I'll be more than willing to make sure we do some review as we go along.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes,
Okay then, well, that's it folks for this week. Have a great weekend coming up.